For this session, we're going to talk about background images. We're going to try to put a background image on the entire page, which will be on the body tag. We'll also put a background image or images on some individual divs. All of this will be done with CSS. So to start out, I've got a basic HTML skeleton here. I actually don't have any divs. All I have at this point, I've got my basic doc type, HTML, the head tag with a title, a link to a style sheet that I haven't made yet. It's blank, I don't have anything in that yet. And then in the body, I've got 3 paragraphs. Okay, so no CSS, no references to CSS with the exception of this link tag, and just 3 basic paragraph tags. The first thing I want to do is start looking at applying background images and background colors to the body tag. Now to do that, I'm going to go ahead and make a new document. This is going to be my CSS. So let me blow those fonts up a little bigger so you can see them. And I'm simply going to put the word body here. Now we've dealt all semester with CSS properties, or CSS selectors, that starts with a dot. And a dot typically means that this is a class. It's something that's going to be reused over and over again. There's also another type of selector called an ID, which starts with a pound. An ID is something that's going to be used once per page, and only once per page. It might be a good idea to maybe create a container as an ID instead of a class, or something you're only going to have one of per page. If you're only going to have one header per page, that could be a pound header instead of a dot header. In this particular course, there's not really a huge benefit of using IDs. Over the long term, you can really do some interactive things with them, like animate divs and make mobile apps and so on. And IDs come in real handy because then you refer to that in JavaScript. But for basic web design, it's not really necessary that you use IDs over classes for anything yet. So all semester long, we've used classes, which is fine. We haven't really seen a good use of a tag. So there's class, ID, and tag. A tag correlates with an existing HTML tag. A class and an ID I can make up, but an HTML tag, a tag for CSS, you can't. It has to be a body or a div or a paragraph or some other tag that you've used. Now what happens when you specify a tag here in CSS, every time you use this tag, the CSS properties and values you're getting ready to add will affect it every time. So this isn't something you use a lot of. You might use it for a body tag to do like the background color or background image. Maybe you put like a default font on here, so if you want every font on every page to be Arial, for example, you could do that here. You also do it sometimes on the anchor tag, so you can format your links so they're not blue and underlined like a standard link is. So for right now, we're just really concerned about getting some backgrounds on here. So I'm going to start by adding a background color. And we've already seen this property and value on a div before. We've done this in a previous session. So this isn't real new to us. I'll say background color pound 369. I'll save this as style.css inside of my root folder. I've already established a root folder for this project prior to starting the video. And now I can go out and take a quick look at that HTML. Now this HTML, I've saved this background image.html. Let me make sure that I've got everything squared away here. So I can save this file, look at this in a browser, and there it is. There are my 3 paragraphs, and there obviously is a background color. Now, no matter how large or small my browser gets, the background extends forever. This website will be blue from top to bottom, left to right, until I put another background on it, or maybe a background on a div. So for right now, I've got a background on here. Now we can also put a background image on. We also looked at this, I believe, last week. A background image might look something like this. And this is assuming that there's a file called bgimage.jpg in my root folder. If it's in an images folder, then I would need something like images/ before it. But since I'm setting this up from scratch here, I'm just going to drop this right in my root folder. So if I go out here to my folders, let's see, I'm going to go into my demo folder. Actually, I'll go to my demo2 folder. I've got some images that I've already got here. So here's one that I sliced from the last session. I'm going to put that right here in my demo folder, and I'm going to rename it so that it is bgimage.jpg. Now, assuming that I spelled that right and I've got my code just right, I should be able to refresh my website here. And sure enough, there is my background image. The background image is this black graphic that says my website on it. It was the first slice in our Photoshop design. And by default, it really, it tiles itself. It repeats itself, which we refer to as tiling, side to side and top to bottom. So it tiles itself forever. No matter how large or small my monitor or my browser windows are, this thing is going to repeat itself. And that might be well and good for some designs, but this particular image is really a horrible image for that. Good background images are ones that have low contrast, are subtle, and repeat well. You can go out to Google and you can search for background images and you'll find lots of free ones. Of course, you can also make your own. But background images generally need to be subtle and maybe a small texture or something like that. If the coolest thing on your website is your background image, you've done something wrong. All right, background images are meant to be just that, in the background. They're not meant to be a big part of the design, just a small detail. So something like this is really a horrible background image. I can't read any of the text that's on here. I can only see a little bit of it when I see on top of the white, which isn't much. So I want a real low contrasted image. Now, just for kicks, I do want to go back to the code and take a look at another CSS property we can add on here. We can change the way that these repeat by simply adding in a new property called background-repeat. And we've got three choices here. We can choose to not repeat this at all, no-repeat, would make it so that my background doesn't repeat at all. It's still a background image. I can still see the text on top of it there, but it's not repeating. I can also put repeat X or repeat Y. Repeat X, if you remember from math, the X-axis being the one that goes side to side. Repeat X will only allow this to repeat side to side and not top to bottom, so it only tiles itself one way. Similarly, we can change that to repeat Y, and we'll refresh that, and sure enough, there it is. It only repeats on the Y-axis, the vertical axis. Still a background. I can still see my text on top of it, but obviously not very well, but it does repeat on one axis. So that's pretty handy. That's going to come in real handy for us here in a little bit. So let's say for the background here, we'll go ahead and leave it repeating. I'm just going to take that background repeat out for right now because I do want it to repeat for a while. Now back in my HTML, I'm actually going to go ahead and drop in a div tag. And just for an example, I'll go ahead and make this an ID equals container. I mentioned earlier that we can make this an ID or a class. If you do want this to be an ID, it has to say ID here instead. Remember, the only difference is you can only use an ID once per page. So this could be the only container I've got on the whole page, which it is anyways. That means for an ID, I'll say pound container, margin of auto, we'll do overflow hidden, background color, 333, and we'll do a width of 955 px. If you save that, and assuming you've also saved your HTML, I'll make sure I've saved both of those, I should be able to run back to my browser, refresh it, and there it goes. So 333 was what I put my background color on. A little dark. So I'm going to go change that to something higher. Maybe I'll even put it all the way up to FFF, which should be white. There we go. Now we can see that a little better. So now we've got a container in the middle of the screen. We've got a background on our body tag, which tiles itself forever. So this just shows you a glimpse into how powerful backgrounds can be. You can have a background in every div. If you have a div inside of a div inside of a div inside of a div, then obviously you can put a background in every one of those and really create a nice layered look on your website. So we don't get layers like Photoshop, but we certainly do have divs inside of divs inside of divs with a background on each one that sure makes it look that way. So that helps us out there. Now I also want to pull up another project, one that we did last time also, that looks something like this. In the last session, we created some Photoshop graphics. We sliced it up. We brought it all into our HTML code. And we ended up with something like this. Our HTML code has several divs in it. It has a container. I believe we have a header and maybe a nav and 2 or 3 columns here. So in any case, we've got all this set up. We added padding to get the text away from the edge. But the problem we really have with this particular design is that the backgrounds are repeating, first of all, and that really creates an ugly look for us. And second of all, we also have this blue background that's our container showing through. And I'd kind of like this pattern to carry on. Okay, I'd like this gray sort of background that I've got here to carry all the way down. Even if there's not enough text, I'd still like it to go all the way down. So we're going to have to trick our users into thinking that that's what's happening. We can't actually adjust the height of one div based on another div over here to affix the background. So in theory, what we're going to do here is we're going to take the background repeat off of all 3 of these columns. So the background won't repeat. I won't get this weird repeating pattern anymore. And then we're going to put a background on the whole container that's going to look like these 3 columns combined. It's going to look like all 3 of those. I'll show you what I mean here. Let's start with our code. Let's go, let's see, we're going to open up. I'm going to close out of these 2 that I have open. Here's my HTML from the last demo. And I'm going to bring my CSS into Text Wrangler also here. And I'll make these fonts a little larger. So we already have all this established. Columns 1, 2, and 3, that's where I want to take the background off. So I'll come in here and I'm simply going to say background, repeat, no repeat. Background, repeat, no repeat. I'm going to copy that line and paste that on all 3 of my columns so that I will not have a repeating pattern on any of them. If I save that and refresh that now, it takes that away. My content's still there. It looks strange because my content keeps going, but my background stops. Okay, so let's run out now to our folder again. And I also believe that I had, let's see, we had a PSD file that I'll quickly open up that should have those same columns in it, that same set of patterns. Now when I open this up in Photoshop, it's probably still going to be sliced from last time around. It's going to look kind of funny, and I'm going to have to adjust those slices a little bit to get it to fit exactly like I want. There we go. So there's my design as we left it. If I go grab my slice tool, they all can magically reappear. Now, the background that I want, the background that I really need my design to look like, is essentially a slice all the way across the bottom here. You know, if I look at that in Chrome again, I essentially want there to be this white background, this orange sort of background, this gray color, more orange, more gray, more orange, the shadow, and more white. So it's a slice all the way across. It's going to contain all of those things. When I go to Photoshop, I've got that. I've got the white, the shadow, the orange, the gray, the orange, the gray, the orange, the shadow, the white. So I can slice something here at the bottom of this. Now, experience tells me that it's a little bit easier sometimes if I just sort of make this its own file. And so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to flatten this thing. I'm going to flatten it. You'll see why in just a few moments. But I'm going to go up to Layer at the top of the screen and down to... where's Flatten at? Oh, it's all the way at the bottom. Sorry about that. I'm going to go down to Layer and all the way down to Flatten Image. So it asks me if I want to get rid of my hidden layers. I'll say sure. So now here in Photoshop, I've actually got it. If you look at my layers, it's all down to one layer. It's going to help me out a little bit here. I'm also going to go up to View at the top of the screen and Clear Slices. I'm going to get rid of all of my existing slices. Now this is kind of dangerous because I do not want to save this file this way. Alright, if anything, you might want to go ahead and save as a different name so we don't mess our original up. But I have no intentions of saving this file ultimately. I'm going to slice a new slice all the way across the bottom here. All the way across the bottom. If I zoom in real close, I can just see that it goes from edge to edge. I got to make sure that it goes all the way across. And I'm basically just getting what's right down here at the bottom. And if I take this little sliver and I repeat it over and over again, that should give me the pattern I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out. I'll go to File and Save for Web. And I only really want this one little slice down here. So remember in the Save for Web, you can hold down your space bar to pan around if you need to, but I'm going to pan up and click just on this little slice down here at the bottom. I'll make a JPEG, give it a quality of 80 over here, and I'll simply hit Save. And on the next screen, I have to choose where to save it, so I'm going to make sure and save it in my demo folder, which is going to be right out here. Let me get to my folder real quick. Session 7, Demo 2. I know from experience it's going to make an images folder, so I'm not going to click on the images folder. If I don't click it, should put it in the images folder automatically. I'm going to call this Container BG for container background. It says images only and all slices. I'm going to change this so that it's not all slices, it's just selected slices. That means it's not going to save this other slice up here or other slices that I might have had. It's just going to save the one I've got. So I'll hit Save. And I'm going to go back to my folder now and see what exactly is going on in my Demo 2 folder. If I go to my images folder that's in that, I now see container underscore BG, which is what I called it, underscore 02. It put a slice number 2 on there because it was slice number 2 in Photoshop. I'm just going to rename that file real quick, take off the 02 underscore so that it's just container BG. So I've created an image that I'd like to set as my background to my container. If I go back to my CSS now, I'm going to go up to the top where I've got my container. And again, this is from my demo from the last session, so this one's still a class, which is fine. I'll leave it that way. Instead of a background color, I'm going to change this to a background image. And it's in images slash container underscore bg.jpg. So we'll save that, go back to our browser and refresh it. And look at that. It makes it look like the bottom of the container, or the container extends all the way down to the bottom. As the container expands, so does its background, and its background lines up seamlessly with the backgrounds for the 3 columns that are already there. So even though to the naked eye it looks like there's this column here in the middle and it extends down forever, it doesn't. It doesn't extend down forever. That column ends about right here, but that's when the background of my container takes over and fills in those gaps. So you got to be strategic about it, but you can use background colors really to really solidify your design. Whether it's a background color on the body tag or overall something back here, it's a background on an individual div, on the container div, you can do a lot with it. The last thing I want to do real quick, it's not really has anything to do with backgrounds, but it does have something to do with the body tag. When I'm in my browser, you see that little gap right there? There's a little gap right up here at the very top of your document. I want to get rid of that, and to do that I can actually set my margins to 0 on the body tag. Another benefit of learning the body tag in your CSS. So I'm going to add it right up here at the top. Just the word body, no dot or pound sign or anything. I'm simply going to say margin 0px. When I refresh, it gets rid of that gap. So we've learned a couple of things about CSS today. We've learned that you can make a body tag that will affect the overall page defaults, the background color, the background image, the margin you can take off. You can set your default fonts there if you want, but the body tag in your CSS is pretty cool and very necessary. We've also learned the continued use of background image on the body, on the container, on individual divs. And then the new property we learned on this session is background repeat. And you can choose no repeat, repeat X, or repeat Y. With these simple technologies and the simple property and values, you can absolutely come up with some great looking designs. So hopefully this helps you out on some of your projects, and we'll see you next session.